In our dummy case, the vehicle examiner found shortcomings in the test standards applied when he carried out a re-examination of a recently tested vehicle. The contemplated cessation letter to the authorised examiner cites shortcomings amounting to 40 points. The letter also cites 2 previous formal warnings, one at 30 points and the other at 50 points. The tester in this case has admitted that he missed the defects and states that he'll be more vigilant if allowed to stay in the scheme, while the AE has stated that he'll keep a closer eye on testing in the future. We'll assume that the tester carried out a satisfactory mystery shopper test 2 years ago and is therefore entitled to 10 credit points, which would also be credited to the AE. The last formal warning letter to the AE was 2 years before the current disciplinary case, so another 10 credit points are awarded for 2 years' satisfactory operation of the testing station. Remember that credit points only come into play should the maximum level of sanction indicated be cessation. So what does the point system lead us to in this case, Jake?
Well, each case will be assessed on its own merits and the particular set of circumstances that led up to the issue of the contemplated cessation letter. The points issued in this case and the flowchart in Appendix 8.7 will indicate the maximum sanction that can be applied after full consideration has been given to the current case and the case that led up to the issue of the formal warning letter.
So each case is unique and assessed accordingly?
That's right, yes.
So shall we have a look at the flowchart and see what the maximum sanction would be?
Yeah. Would you like to talk us through it, Robert?
Yeah, of course. This case scores 40 points, which takes us to the third part of the flowchart. There are 2 previous formal warnings, but as they only total 80 points between them, it means that the maximum sanction is a further formal warning.
That's right. But let's now consider what would have happened if we'd had a third warning to consider, say another 30 points. That would bring the total points from previous warning letters to 110.
OK, so that in that case, the flowchart would lead us to Formula A, which is the points from the current case plus points from unspent formal warnings, less any credit points. So in our example case, we've got 40 points from the current case, plus 110 points from the 3 previous unspent formal warnings, less the 20 credit points. That comes to 130 points.
That's right. And if we refer this back to the chart, we can see that because Formula A now is less than 140 points, the maximum sanction we can apply is again a formal warning.
So that would mean the AE would have 4 current formal warnings. How long do they last?
Well, normally they last for 5 years, but they can be reduced to 2 years for shortcomings that are listed in Appendix 8.4. And accompanying these warning letters, that there may be a requirement for the authorised examiner to successfully complete further training.
So for an AE, that may mean attendance at an MOT manager's course?
And that's right. And for a tester, it'll probably be a directed retraining course, and that will be tailored specifically to the shortcomings that were noted at the time of the event that led to the issue of the formal warning.
And is there a time limit to complete this training?
Yes, there is, and that will be stated in the letter we send them. If either the authorised examiner or tester fail to attend the training course, then their authority to test will cease, and it will remain that way until they've successfully completed any further training.
If our dummy case had resulted in a cessation instead of a formal warning, how long would the cessation last?
Well, that will be stated in Section I of the testing guide, which states that it's normally going to last for 5 years.
And does the cessation take effect immediately?
No, it doesn't. Cessation for disciplinary reasons usually takes effect 35 working days after the notice of cessation has been issued. However, VOSA can reduce this if they think there's a serious risk to road safety.
How much might it be reduced to?
10 working days if the case justifies 140 points or more after any credits have been considered. And previous formal warnings justifying a total of 140 points or more are still valid. However, notice of cessation may be reduced to just 1 day if the case being considered justifies single offence cessation for fraud, dishonesty, gross negligence, or for a conviction, if it's for a very serious offence in connection with the MOT scheme or motor trade.
Let's move on to appeals. Can you take us through the appeals process?
Okay. As well as appeals, we'll also look at the formal warning review process that was introduced in 2007.
OK, let's start with formal warning reviews. What exactly are they?
Well, there never has been a statutory right of appeal against the issue of a formal warning at the time it was issued. They would only be considered by appeals section in cases where the formal warning was cited in a further case, which subsequently led to cessation.
And so what's changed?
Well, after consultation with the trade industry, the authorised examiner and nominated testers were granted a non-statutory right of a review of any formal warning.
OK, so what's the process?
Well, if the authorised examiner or tester believes that the issue of a formal warning letter is unjustified or that the allocation of points is excessive, they may request a review of the case.
And is there a timescale in which they have to make that request?
Yes, there is. They will have to apply in writing within 14 working days of the date of the issue of the formal warning letter.
And where do they write to?
Well, they'll have to write to the local VOSA office that issued that warning letter, and then it will be forwarded on to the appeals section for review. OK, so what about appeals against cessation? Is the process the same? Yes, it's very similar. In order to have your appeal considered, you must apply in writing by letter, fax or email. Give a reason. It's not enough to say, I wish to appeal. You must say why your authorisation or approval should not cease. To assist you, grounds of appeal are listed in the guidance. In time. Your written appeal must arrive within 14 working days from the date on the cessation notice. To the right place. It must be delivered to the address on the notice, usually VOSA's local area office. You don't have to complete the appeal yourself. Someone, a friend, employer, consultant or solicitor, can act on your behalf.
Are they allowed to make their appeal in person?
Yes, they can. An appellant can request an informal hearing whereby they can present their own representations in person to a member of the appeals section.
And details of this can be found in Appendix 8.8, can't they?
That's right. But it's important to note that any such informal hearing is additional to and not in place of any written representations.
And is it a bit like appearing in court?
No, not at all. It's informal and it'll be held in one of VOSA's meeting rooms.
And would anybody else attend an informal hearing?
Well, the appeals section will arrange the meeting and they'll invite representatives of the local area office to come along as well. And they may ask an engineer if any technical items may need further discussion for clarification.
And I assume that the AE or NT is also allowed to be represented by their trade association, consultant or solicitor?
Yes, you assume right, Robert, yeah. And any oral representations will be recorded and considered along with any evidence held on the file before an appeal is decided.
How independent is the appeal process?
Well, appeal sections are completely separate from and totally independent to VOSA's MOT operational policy areas. This is essential for the integrity of the process.
And what aspects of the case will they consider?
Well, they'll look at the local area office considerations and decisions, and also any interview responses and representations. They'll also consider to see if the disciplinary action taken was lawful, fair and reasonable, and whether any disciplinary action was proportionate to the circumstances.
So a complete review of the case then. How long does the appeal process usually take?
Well, it's normally processed within 5 weeks of the appeal date or the informal hearing. Most cases are processed in date order, and it's worthy of note that you may be in a queue of cases waiting to be processed.
If, say, an AE is anxiously waiting the outcome of an appeal, is there anything they can do?
If an AE or tester is anxious about the progress of their case, they can contact MOT Appeals to find out where they are in the queue and when they might expect a decision.
What happens if the date of cessation in the cessation notice has arrived, but the appeal hasn't yet been decided?
Well, you must stop testing on the date specified in the notice, even if you haven't yet had your decision. When the decision is made, appeals will write to you telling you what the decision is, along with a comprehensive explanation as to how the decision was made.
And what are the chances of an appeal succeeding?
Well, that will depend on the particular circumstances of the case, but currently about 20% of all appeals are successful.
What are the reasons that can lead to an appeal being allowed?
Well, for instance, if someone handling the disciplinary case has made a serious procedural error, or if there's doubt about the circumstances surrounding the case, the quality of the evidence, or the penalty imposed is considered to be too harsh.
OK, I've gone through the appeals process and lost. Is there anything I can do if I'm unhappy with the decision?
Yeah, there are 2 more avenues you can take. You can approach your Member of Parliament with a view to having the case referred to the Ombudsman, or alternatively, you can apply for permission to have the case reviewed by a judge by way of a judicial review.
Could you do that yourself?
Well, you can do, yes, but most people would take legal advice on that.
Overall, Jake, how many AEs or NTs are likely to encounter formal disciplinary action?
Well, actually, very few. Most authorised examiners and nominated testers take their roles and responsibilities very seriously, and generally they do a good job. To give you an example, only about 1% of testers each year will actually get involved in formal disciplinary action, and out of those, only a quarter will actually end up in cessation.
Great, Jake, thanks very much.